For today's discourse, the sutta, I selected one that was just finished this week, in fact, a challenging sutta to read, to translate, and today we'll attempt to explore together. Challenging because it will try to dismantle life, the process, the course of life that we undergo in the way we approach experience. That experience could be how we come across, how we approach feelings, for example, how we approach our attitudes towards the feelings, what we do with them. Oftentimes we forget that the Dhamma is all about looking deeply. The term is, in English, that I like to use a lot is penetrating. Panya is a word that Lord Buddha used a lot. Panya is wisdom, discernment. Wisdom is not something that you enter into and you stay there, the door gets locked and you're safe. It's like a position now, it's like, it's like kingship. You're given that authority for the rest of your life, or eternity, whatever. Discernment is an ongoing process. Wisdom is application-based. What I mean by that is it's always engaging. But how do you engage wisdom? For that life that you are living is the very means by which wisdom is tasted, is experienced. But wisdom is not going to just drop into our laps without us doing the work. For that, we need to have proper mindfulness. There is proper or correct mindfulness versus so many incorrect, improper mindfulness. When we look at the Noble Eightfold Path, for example, Lord Buddha makes it very clear when he says, Samma sati. We often think that there's sati. Oh yeah, just have sati. No, 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 no. Especially in the world today of mindfulness this, mindfulness that. It's very easy to be confused. Any type of sati that doesn't take you straight to clear understanding, discernment, executable wisdom is wrong sati. Miccha sati. Wrong sati. Anything that the type of mindfulness that takes you straight to understanding without telling yourself any lies anymore about life, about the practice. The term that I was expressing earlier while you were sitting through the guided meditation portion was yatha bhutang. Yatha bhutang means how things come to be. It doesn't need your support. It doesn't need our embellishments. It doesn't need, in this case, it meaning life, the experiential life that you're having, you're tasting, you're undergoing right now. And every time you have proper sati is brick by brick, layering an unprecedented level of understanding for you. You. The Dhamma can only be tasted by you. That's why words are just words. Dhamma talks, discourses like this, or explorations, ultimately, they're just outside of you, unless you engage with proper, correct sati, and then you start peeking through, you start seeing through, penetrating through your own newly gained understanding, and then life no longer happens to you. You see life taking shape in and all around you with eyes that actually can see for the first time. That means already you have been applying proper, correct sati, samma sati. And when you have samma sati, it is bound to take you to samma samadhi. There's no need for you to tell yourself any lies about the practice. You will know. You will know. So, disassembling is the word today throughout this sutta. It's a, I don't want to intimidate you by saying it's a complex sutta. However, it will require your sati, proper sati, to maintain your course, because the mind likes to jump around into colorful areas, be lost in passions, fuzzy feelings of good versus bad. We need to be grown-ups in this, alert, wise, and mature. And this sutta definitely does the job in helping us see how the process of living takes place. So without further ado, I want to introduce us to this sutta, which comes from the Samyutta Nikaya, the Connected Discourses. And it is from the causation section on causations, Nidana Vagga Samyutta, from Dhatu Samyutta. Dhatu usually is translated as elements. I used to translate them as elements, but I found that that doesn't do the job, because given the context, it varies. So a better term that I'm using now is fundamental constituent, because it can change. Because the mind will, especially coming from a Western educational background, which today actually is everywhere, the standards of Western science, for example, when we see or hear the word element, we're thinking about elements as in rough elements or periodic table, etc. That's not what we're talking about here, because the mind will like to hold on to things. But when we say fundamental constituent, what we're talking about are rather things that are shifting, play a role, shift, play a role, shift. But that doesn't stop them from being a constituent part of a phenomenon that is taking place right now. So dhatu, that's one way of approaching it. So connected discourses on fundamental constituents, dhatu samyutta, from the natta vagga. Natta here is varieties, section on varieties. So the sutta is 14.9, Bāhira Phassa Nānatta Sutta. In English, I translate it as assets acquired through contact that one does not let go. I know it's a mouthful, but in this 10 sutta section of the Samyutta Nikaya, you have a lot of these titles to You can see how it's difficult to capture. Even the compilers, when they had to title it, the sutta, among the others, along with the others, they had to really unravel it and try to include the various different aspects of this deep teaching in a title. And you can only do so far. And English being a lot more, well, actually a lot drier language than Pali, we have to use more words. So 14.9, Samyutta Nikaya, Bāhira Phassa Nānatta Sutta. Let's begin. This is what I personally heard. Once, while the Blessed One was staying in Savatthi, he turned to the bhikkhus and said, Bhikkhus, yes, Blessed Lord. The bhikkhus replied. The Blessed One then continued by saying, Bhikkhus, the varieties in the fundamental constituents are what give rise to the varieties of perceptions, which in turn give rise to the varieties of the intentional thoughts one ponders. These varieties of intentional thoughts are then what give rise to the varieties of contacts. The varieties of contacts then give rise to the varieties of feelings. The varieties of these feelings then bring about the varieties of desires and fervent interests, which then, in turn, produce the varieties of lustful appetites and longings. Furthermore, it is the varieties of these longings and passionate drives that lead a person on an unending series of quests. And it is these varieties of unending quests that bring forth the varieties of assets, which one continuously seeks to acquire and not let go. And what, bhikkhus, are the varieties in the fundamental constituents mentioned here? So Lord Buddha is going to unravel this very thick bundle of twine or principles. You already understand like how heavy this is. It's so saturated with principles. Remember, this sutta comes from a section that belongs in the overall group that is called the Nidana Vagga Sangyutta. Nidana is on causation. So what we're essentially talking about is paticca-samuppada, dependent arising. So what we're seeing here is the paticca aspect of one thing causing or bringing about or serving as a condition for the other that comes up. So nothing comes out of nothing. So if you think of the experiencing of a phenomenon that you have on a minute or second by second basis, you can think of it as the various rungs of a ladder that takes you, the ladder itself, you put it against the wall of a building that takes you from the basement or from the ground level to the second floor, third floor, or whatever. So you can even approach it in that fashion where one rung, the bottom rung, is the fundamental constituent, the dhatu that I mentioned earlier. But Lord Buddha is not going to just explain all the way to the top without first explaining to us what he means by dhatu, fundamental constituent here. So that's why Lord Buddha has to unravel it, tell us what that is. Dhatu. There is the fundamental constituent that is visible form. So there is the dhatu that is visible form. The fundamental constituent that is audible sound. The fundamental constituent that is smell. The fundamental constituent that is flavor or taste. The fundamental tactile constituent that is to be felt by the body. And the fundamental mental constituent that is to be cognized by the mind. So, just to put this sutta in context, in the earlier portions of, because this sutta happens to be number 9 of a 10 sutta section. So this is the one before the last. So the last one of this 10 groups of suttas, or 10 group of suttas, is so 10. So this is number 9. So in the beginning portion, so 14.1, 14.2, etc., Lord Buddha is explaining in more basic primary steps of what the dhatu, or fundamental constituent, is. So in it, because it's coming out of the dependent arising principle, we're still standing on the rock solid ground that is dependent arising, paticca samuppada. So the Buddha, in those earlier suttas, just to put it in context, he uses the I as one dhatu, fundamental constituent. And then in the same sutta, he says the other dhatu is the visible object that the eye is looking at. So that's another dhatu, which here we see only the visible form, if you noticed. Lord Buddha is not talking about the eye here anymore, because it's already given. So that's why I want to touch on that, so you know the fuller picture. And then he uses the completion of these two. When you have eye and visible object, what those two bring together, the meeting of the two, is I consciousness. Okay? I, phassa, in this case, phassa would be the vijnana, right? So I consciousness is when these two other dhatus meet. So in this section, Lord Buddha is not talking about, because otherwise it would have been a lot longer sutta. Because whatever the Lord Buddha is talking about, he will explain, elaborate. So he just is picking the visible form dhatu. That's what I'm trying to say. He's not talking about the eye, which is, in a sense, the organ that sees the visible object, nor is it the meeting of these two, which is I consciousness, that he's going to be referring to here, because this sutta comes much later than the earlier of the 14s that we're on 14.9. So I hope that makes sense. So here we have the 6 sense objects, not the organs. This is part of the salayatana, but Lord Buddha is describing it under a different title here. So that's why many people get stuck on terms, because they memorize a term, they put it in a compartment in their mind, and they say, this is how it is, this is how it's supposed to be. So they become slaves to their own opinions and ideas about the Dhamma, and that is kiss of death. There's not going to be any wisdom taking place in that mind of the person. I don't care if it's a monk, a layperson, 50, 60, 80 years of studying Dhamma, or even practicing, thinking that they're practicing. Because there is crystallization or solidification of ideas. Person is stuck. And the Dhamma, there's nothing about the Dhamma, pure Dhamma, that is, that can be stuck. It's flowing. It's real, it's alive. So here, visible form is the fundamental constituent that Lord Buddha is going to start with. But he just gave us the whole 6, including the mind. And let's continue. These, therefore, are the varieties in the fundamental constituents, dhatus. And what is meant by the varieties in the... So Lord Buddha is going to reiterate what he said in the beginning. This is a crucial part of the pedagogical or the teaching methodology that the Buddha used. Any good teacher, anybody who deserves the title of a good teacher, knows that in order for students to learn something, you need to first present the concept, just the title, just in a nutshell. Make your thesis, statement, what it is about. And then you go exploring it, opening it up, unraveling it. And then even at the end, you need to come back to the major thesis. And then you have to represent that. But now, because of the richness of understanding that you have inculcated, you've encouraged in the minds of the students, everything sits into place. So here, Lord Buddha doesn't just say that thesis twice, but he's also including it. And, this is the second time in the sutta that you're going to see this thick paragraph. He says, what is meant by the varieties in the fundamental constituents are what give rise to the varieties of perceptions, which in turn give rise to the varieties of intentional thoughts one ponders. So I'm not going to repeat that because we've already said it, and the PDF is available, as I've always mentioned, on the website, mindrelease.com. Please print it and have it in front of you because it requires you to see, because the mind is lazy. The attention is much shorter now for most people. So to have that in front of you is really helpful to connect and maybe even draw diagrams or a chart, a graph. First is this is happening, then that is happening, okay? So perceptions are the things that we start from right after the dhatu. So the varieties in the fundamental constituents are what give rise to the varieties of perceptions. Varieties, that's the natta portion of the Pali title. So Lord Buddha says, and so what does this statement mean then? So he's now going to address by approaching the six sense bases, or the objects of the six senses. So he's going to be unraveling the statement through the six sense organs, or actually the objects of them. I'm sorry. So first we start with the eye. So he's putting it in context. That's what I'm trying to say. Bhikkhus, when one keeps giving attention to the fundamental constituent that is visible form, then this itself causes the arising of the varieties of perceptions that have to do with such visible forms. So I'm going to make several stops here because every single portion is a gem, is loaded. The best teachers that we can have to learn Dhamma from is the group of constituents that are called the salayatana, or the six senses. As I mentioned, here the Buddha is not using the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, or the mind as such, but they're objects. The things that these things are projected towards. We are turning our attention towards the world, loka. So when one keeps attention on the fundamental constituent, the dhatu, that is the visible object that you're looking at. It could be something good, it could be something ugly, it could be something appalling that you don't want to look at. But nevertheless, there is that pull you want to look away from because there's a relationship. But how is this happening? When there is attention given to the visible object, then Lord Buddha says, this itself causes the arising of the varieties of perceptions that have to do with such visible forms. You now have perceptions about the visible object. Now there's a relationship that you have with the object, the visible object, the thing that you are looking at. It might be creating scary feelings in you, or terror, or you might be jubilant suddenly for no reason. Well, you saw something that you think, I don't know, maybe it's finding some money that nobody's there and it's yours now. When you reach over, you're going to grab it, but you saw it, so now you're perceiving things. So there's a relationship that now we have, but you will not have the relationship without first there being sanya, perception, taking place. So the eye saw the object, perception. You remember I was mentioning the example of the ladder, the rungs? I hope you follow along with that image, because each one is going to unfold into the other. These, in turn, give rise to the varieties of intentional thoughts one ponders as a result of having seen a visible form. Now you're no longer just perceiving. You need to have a relationship with that perception, right? That's when the mind gets to work. It's no longer just perception. You have a relationship with me, which means you're involved with your thinking. We're talking about sankharas now, intentionally. There's a habitual pattern that you're now locked on, like the Pavlov dog image. The dog hears the bell, there is a connection. Now the dog is looking around, expecting, drooling at the corner of the mouth, waiting for food to show up because it detected something. For us, it happens as quickly as it does with a dog, We don't think of ourselves as four-legged animals, but when you look at the formula of what is really taking place in the background. So the intentional thoughts that one starts pondering, you're starting to think about it, you're starting to be pulled in. All of it started how? You saw there was a visible form, and the visible form instigated, triggered perceptions, varieties. Remember, natta here is the varieties, the various kinds. It's not just a linear type of perception, first this and that. No, it's like a prism. The prism, the pyramid that when you hit it with a light source, and then all of a sudden you have rainbow colors. But it's not just 7 or 8 colors. It's actually a lot more. It's a variety of perceptions that shoot out suddenly. Now, the intentional thoughts then give rise to the varieties of contacts having to do with that visible form. Now there's going to be more contacts. It's like a nuclear explosion. It's like the neutrons, or when the plutonium is blowing up inside of a atomic or nuclear bomb, there's a trigger, and the plutonium atoms go ahead and look around for any neutrons out there, and they will go and split those, and they will form double. It's like Medusa, not Medusa, but Hydra head from Greek mythology. And like you cut off one head, it turns into 7. That's what happens with one contact. Why does it happen? Because there is no awareness of what's happening. You're just haphazardly living. You're not aware of what's happening. That's why living at the edge of your sensations, at the edge of your 6 senses in this case, means living without any awareness. You're simply at the whim of whatever's happening. And that is not the path of Dhamma. That's never been the path of the Dhamma. That's why following our passions, which is coming up next, is dangerous. There's no growth from that because you won't see it. There's the drama. You're just going to be playing your part in it without realizing that you could stop this blind unfolding, thinking of life to be just this process. But no, we have to understand the process, because there's many, many, many contacts taking place because of the intentional thoughts. Because remember, contact doesn't just mean physical touch. Ideas, perceptions are not going to just stay one singular perception. Your intentional thoughts will not just stay as a one single intentional thought. They will proliferate, papancha. Which in turn trigger the varieties of feelings to arise. From contacts, there's feelings now pertaining to the visible form. Now, the visible form, you might have encountered it, witnessed it, excuse me, half an hour ago or 3 days ago. but it's still triggering. You can't sleep. You're thinking about it. Oh, how could she? How could he? How da 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 da. Because you're now stuck what we call in the story. What is that? As far as the nidanas are concerned, the causation principle of dependent arising is concerned, what is really happening? Well, because one moment is not being lived fully with proper sati, that invariably causes the triggering of other contacts. Now, each contact, unfortunately, is going to open the doors, plural, of many feelings. It's inevitable. When there is contact, there will be feelings, plural. All triggered, in this case, using the example of visible form, visible object. Now, it is the varieties of these feelings which then give rise to the varieties of desires and fervent interests involved with visible forms. This is chanda, 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 which is a fervent interest or desire. That's at the bottom of everything. You do something because you have the desire for it, basically. You're here attending this exploration of the suttas because you had the desire for it. You go to this restaurant, you eat that food, you go to this, I don't know, event, because there's got to be some justifying factor, some intent, in a sense, some basic spark. That basic spark, Lord Buddha always comes back to chanda, including wanting to have the experience of arahantship, freedom. That also requires chanda, by the way. So we don't throw away desire completely in this tradition. On some level, desire is necessary, but we let go of it in time. Once we're really there, scot-free, home free. Because it becomes a hindrance otherwise. Now, these desires and fervent interests directed towards those visible forms then, in turn, produce the varieties of lustful appetites and longings for more visible forms. So now we're talking about passion. We're talking about lust, lusting. This is when you can't sleep over what you saw, or you can't get that thing that you saw out of your head. If it was some object or thing that you wanted to, you didn't think that you needed it, but now, because you're entertaining those perceptions, intentional thoughts, and newer and newer contacts are taking place, and newer feelings are taking place, and all this chain reaction that's happening in you, you're agitated. And when you're agitated, naturally you want to put a stop to it by creating some level of appeasement. And that appeasement comes from trying to gratify it. How? Oh, you finally do this. Oh, let me just go ahead. That's where you go and hit the buy button. If you were going to buy something on Amazon or something, or you want to swipe the screen on your phone or something, or you want to go to the store and buy it, because you just want to go get it and be done with it on some level. But essentially, it's the longing, the lustful longing. So you see the mechanical aspect of this whole thing, that we give it a mystique, this mystery. Oh, life, yeah. People have been writing countless times over the course of history, poetry and romance novels and this and art and sculptures and this and that. What are they trying to capture? This. We have glorified all this. Meanwhile, we are nailing ourselves in samsāra. That's why people are surprised when I say there is no freedom from samsāra in any other tradition than in this path that the Lord Buddha, historical Lord Buddha, taught. I'm not the only one saying it, because Lord Buddha says so in countless suttas, which unfortunately people don't discuss nowadays. They want to hide it. But that's lying. That's deceiving ourselves and others. So once you know these, once you understand these, once you penetrate every living experience as it starts to unfold in front of your eyes, you see the value of this path, and you really become free moment to moment from your hanging on to old patterns. That's how suffering becomes less and less. With your help, with your effort, you yourself will stop the suffering, not the Buddha, not the Dhamma even. But your application of the Dhamma will make that happen. That's why you won't see this anywhere else, except in the Dhamma. The methods with which you can cut yourself free from samsāra, which is not wishful thinking anymore. It's real. It's real. Furthermore, it is the it is the varieties of these longings and passionate drives for certain visible forms that lead a person on an unending series of quests pertaining to other and more visible forms. So now the person is stuck on the hamster wheel, constantly running from one thing to the next. Because there is no investigation of what's really happening. Investigating, why am I, this passion was not there. What happened? Passion doesn't necessarily mean just anything that's sensual or sexual, but it could be passionate anger. As I said, boring, like, oh, pushing something away. It's disgusting. I don't want to see it. That's why when an arahant looks at a dead body or visualizes their own body coming apart, or they see something deplorable, like Venerable Mahakassapa. One time, he was on Pindapada. He was collecting his alms food for the day, and he saw a poor person, a leper. A leper is someone who has this debilitating sickness, disease, where the body starts atrophied, becomes atrophied to the point where limbs start falling off. Fingers, nose, ears, it's very bad, we can't describe it any worse than that. So there's this leper. He sees Venerable Mahakassapa standing there. Now, Venerable Mahakassapa could have just walked away and says, "Oh, I don't want to deal with this. Come on." He was known as the Bhikkhu with the most austere regimen. He used to practice all the duttangas, for example, austerities. But he had just come out of his state of cessation of feeling and perception. And anyone who offers food to such a being will get tremendous rewards. So Venerable Mahakassapa did not want to deprive this person from that opportunity of gaining such enormous merit. So he stood there. Now, as the leper had collected some food, people had taken pity on him, so gave him some dried, like leftover food and rice or bread or something. He looked at him and he's like, okay. So he approaches Venerable Mahakassapa, and as he's dropping the food into Venerable Mahakassapa's bowl, one of his own fingers breaks off and falls into the bowl. He's a leper. That happens to the lepers, as I said. Limbs come apart. His finger fell into the bowl of Venerable Mahakassapa. Now, Venerable Mahakassapa, being an arahant of that level, saw, of course, the finger falling, but he was more interested not just in the falling of the finger into his bowl, but he was interested in what's happening in his mind in relation to the finger, the dead piece of tissue that fell into his bowl. He didn't go, I'm supposed to eat that now? No. He was, I can't even say he was beyond it, because when you have sati, every moment is pure practice time, is penetrating into the Dhamma time. You're penetrating into the deathless by what it is that your eyes are catching. In this case, it's a visible form of a leper's finger falling into your bowl. And that's all he's going to eat. He couldn't go and toss it out, the food, and say, it's polluted now. No. Man goes, he's watching his mind. He sits down somewhere under a tree and pushes the finger out of his way, and he starts eating his meal, morsel by morsel. Now, you cannot do that. It's impossible for you to do that if you have lusts and passions and ponderings and perceptions going on in your head. Others will be, I can't believe I'm carrying a dead guy's finger in my bowl for the kilometer or so that they're still walking back to the monastery, let's say. Because that's what happens. Ajahn Mun, I think, mentioned to some of his students at one point how they were walking back from Pindapata, and some people had given, no, some of his Bhikkhu students actually had come back, but there was, I think somebody had given them durian or fish, and the Bhikkhus were constantly thinking about that. One of them cannot even handle that excitement, and he sits at the corner of a street, and he starts eating it or throwing away, whatever, because he was so obsessed by the content of his bowl, good or bad. But he was definitely not just moved, but he was passionately involved with what had taken place, which he had detected with his visible organ, eye, visible object. That's the dhatu. So you see how these things are happening so fast. That's why we need to have correct sati. Otherwise, you're just gone, like going into a movie theater, and until it says finish, the lights come on, you're not aware that this has happened. But this is happening all the time. Most of us are not aware. And it is these varieties of unending quests for visible forms that bring forth the varieties of assets having to do with visible forms, which one continuously seeks to acquire and not let go. Assets, upadhi, oftentimes translated, although in the sutra it's translated differently from what I remember. But essentially it's the same thing. The things that we like to acquire and hold on, which is why we keep coming back into various different births in samsāra, because it's so difficult for us to let go of, to give up what we have acquired. That acquiring could be ideas, that could be a sense of belonging somewhere, feeling cozy about some ideology. And when I look around the world, I mean, you look around the world, you see it too. Just see how people nowadays are seeking identifications with certain things, passionately driven. Whether it's supposed climate change people all of a sudden blocking streets in different parts of the world, Europe, this place and that place. And meanwhile, they've had their breakfast and they've had their lunch, or they've had their, daddy take them to the place where they're going to protest, chain themselves on the roads to people to stop them from going to work, using cars, which we're using gasoline, etc., without this, going on a tangent, we don't think about what it is that we are doing. We're just feel the thing, and it's the passionate level, the gradation of how intensely am I feeling, and that feeling as if has become the thing that validates itself. Meaning the very fact that I am experiencing this very strong emotion authenticates it. So I have to go and enact it. I have to act it out. I have to come and kill your family. I have to come and take your land. I have to come and, because of some idiotic, stupid, foolish, lie, deceptive ideology of my race, my people being better, this is ours type of a thing, coming and killing children for generations. But then I come around and see other people who think like me, and now all of a sudden I'm feeling cozy and, so the feeling, the passionate, lustful feeling, the intensity, the color of that makes me look at others who are also feeling that, and now we feel, okay, we exist, this is real, so it must be real. It is true, and we can become passionate, we can even become tearful, emotionally charged, and that's when people go ahead and kill more people. There's that saying in English, the road to destruction is paved with good intentions, something like that. And that's what we see around. So, but when you look narrowly, look deep, penetrate it to what the cause is, we see that it's all based on perceptions that we allow to run amok, to run the show. And soon enough, they turn into those triggering mini atomic nuclear explosions in us, where we suddenly have more and more perpetually growing desire to become more drenched in it. One thing for sure is not happening. There's no calm. There's no tranquility in a mind of a person who wants to protest and say, I'm going to this, I'm that. Fighting for justice, people talk about justice. If you give them a gun, they're going to kill someone. When you think about it, when you see the anger on their face. Lord Buddha used to scold left and right people, students or people who were misrepresenting the Buddha, the Dhamma. People don't want to consider that, but the Buddha was very much involved with chastising people as well. But he didn't carry that. He didn't hold a grudge against anyone, including Devadatta. This is something that in our thinking, in our ways of identifying with emotions, we cannot ponder that such a possibility. But that's what Lord Buddha was saying to Bāhira. When seeing, Bāhira, just see. There's just seeing, nothing else. That cuts through perception. You're done. You don't go through this whole paragraph. It's done. When hearing, you just hear. Well, I can't believe he said that about my mom. Really? Already you're past the point of no return because you made it about you. Well, yeah, but he was addressing me. He was talking to me about my mom. Okay, but a donkey cries or cows, they do their own, or a rooster yells. I don't know what they're saying. Maybe they're cursing at me. I don't know. But perception is the thing which is the culprit here. Sometimes some students have come and said, I can't stand my in-laws, or I can't stand this person, my boss, treating me like this, and they've been talking about me behind my back. I can't believe it. I just want to do this to them, this and that. And let's say a few times I would say, I remember I said, one time I said, do you, to this one particular person, do you know Japanese? And he said, no. And I said, does this person, let's say your boss, your in-laws, do they know Japanese? And he said, no. I said, okay. When next time you hear them talking, yapping away, saying those negative things about you, I need you to visualize as if they're talking Japanese. Would you get offended? You don't understand the language. How could you be offended? If the person is, you think to yourself, oh, they're speaking Swahili, okay? They might be saying some horrific things about you and your mom, but you don't know, and they have a lovely smile on their face. No one's offended. See, your perception, you just changed it. And that bears an impact, direct impact on your well-being. If you pause for a moment and say, what's going on? If I did not enter this elevator with these people and they started laughing, I wouldn't have thought about their laughter being possibly directed at me. But because they're speaking in a different language and they're laughing, they're giggling together, I'm thinking they're laughing about me. Okay, what if I had waited a few more seconds and the elevator took off without me? Would I feel this rage that I feel now? No. Do you see what's happening? Contact, but the relinquishment of our responsibility over perceptions. We just let them run amok, let them do whatever they want, wreak havoc in our mind. And now you're completely passionately involved with anger, with lust. So this is the visible. Now, I'm going to try to go over the other other five senses if my voice, because I'm not feeling well today, but I hope I can be able to accomplish that, going over the other five senses, fundamental constituents, dhatus. But it's the same principle, but Lord Buddha is addressing. There are nuances, of course, differences, but the teaching is the same for everyone because the steps that Lord Buddha went over are exactly the same for each of these six. Visible object, audible sound, detectable fragrance, let's say, or odor or smell, taste or flavor, tactile object, something that you can touch, tangible, and thoughts, cognizable thoughts, ideas, thoughts, etc. So we just did the visible form. So I'll go faster and let's see. Bhikkhus, when one keeps giving attention to the fundamental constituent that is audible sound, and this itself causes the arising of the varieties of perceptions that have to do with such audible sounds. These in turn give rise to the varieties of the intentional thoughts one ponders as a result of having heard an audible sound. Same thing. Eyesight picks up visible object if your attention is on it. And then audible sound if your attention is on your ear. Now, in many places in the sutta, we see, in the suttas, we see how the sound is a lot more ruthless in penetrating your awareness. You can always close your eyes and look somewhere else, but with the sound, because it's permeating everywhere, air molecules are carrying the sound waves into your eardrum, it's a lot harder to block it. But it's a lot more powerful practice in meditation when we're dealing with sounds. That's why those people, monks who would rush to go to seclusion in the forest, thinking that they're going to have quiet, you can almost see Lord Buddha giggling at such a delusion. Because if you've ever gone into the forest, it's very noisy. So many people run out of the forest because when the animals, wild animals, especially when it gets slightly quiet and all of a sudden there's a roar of some type of an animal, or heavy breathing, all kinds of emotions come out. It can be a wonderful practice for those who have strong willpower and patience, and especially sati, to use all this, but it's a lot harder to deal with the audible sound. That's what I'm trying to say. So perceptions can really go on, maximum turbo form when you're dealing with the audible sound constituent versus the visible object. The intentional thoughts that then give rise to the varieties of contacts having to do with that sound, which in turn trigger the varieties of feelings to arise pertaining to the audible sound. It is so you start hearing the sounds and the perceptions, and now more contacts are taking place in your mind because of those perceptions. It might have been triggered by that one particular sound, by the way. But now your perceptions are going wild in your head because now you're constructing papanchas. And they are like a chain reaction, I said earlier, right? Newer and newer feelings are being generated. These are like tiny little explosions that are happening because that moment happened and you carried it. You put it in your bag. You didn't do what Bāhira did. You took the sound and you made it yours. You had a relationship with it, I mean. You gave it a story. We love to give stories to these six senses. And that's mainly the problem. We don't let it be. This is mine. This is myself. This is who I am. This and me are one and the same thing. That is atta, believing in atta, the substantiality of a me-ness. That's wrong. According to the Dhamma that the Buddha taught, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Anatta was flat out him telling us there's no such thing anywhere for you to find, to look for. But with every six senses, every one of the six senses, that's what we're desperately trying to hook ourselves to. This relationship is special. You are special to me, etc., etc. Losing battle because it's wrong. There's nothing to attach to. That's the thing. Anatta. These desires and so it is the varieties of these feelings which then give rise to the varieties of desires and fervent interests, chanda, involved with audible sounds. So now we're more interested, vested in it. These desires and fervent interests directed towards those audible sounds then in turn produce the varieties of lustful appetites and longings for more audible sounds. This is basically Lord Buddha saying, he's going counter to what today's AI industry is doing. Every time you look at your smartphone, AI is working against you. They figured out what we like, what we don't like. I have a relative of mine, close relative, who one time had mentioned how we don't communicate anymore, but basically his whole objective was to use AI back in the day to predict people's choices. In fact, not just predict, use those predictive aspects of decoding your behavior and start influencing your behavior, which is what we see now. That's what advertisements always have done, but they didn't have a system in place that is so manipulative as it is now, to such a level. And I would try to bring this up and saying this is totally immoral, totally spineless. And they would look at me as, what's wrong with me? I'm not thinking responsibly, financially savvy way. How could I be stupid to think such? But that's exactly what the Dhamma is. It is pulling the veil down. It is showing you all the magician's tricks. That's what the Dhamma is, showing you, revealing to you the tricks that the magician has been pulling, the sand that he keeps throwing at us in our eyes, so you get not to see what's happening. Why? Because you're holding on to your feelings, emotions, and how you react to those. Furthermore, it is the varieties of these longings and passionate drives for certain audible sounds that lead a person on an unending series of quests pertaining to other and more audible sounds. And it is these varieties of unending quests for audible sounds that bring forth the varieties of assets having to do with audible sounds, which one continuously seeks to acquire and not let go. Fortunately, we have anicca that comes in and says, I don't care if you're going to let go or not, your body's dying, your memory is failing. But from our end, we still clench it, even if there's nothing to clench. That's the problem. That's why we die with longing and desire. We don't even know what we're desiring, but that energy that we have kept on creating, that momentum, that itself keeps driving us from life to life. We just need a cause. We just need an object. Give me something, anything I want to attach myself to. That's the attitude that gets us stuck again and again in samsāra. And the Dhamma is 180 degrees opposite to it, diametrically opposite to such a way. This world is seeking to keep you captive. The Dhamma is seeking to give you the tools to cut yourself free from that captivity. Responsibility is what the Dhamma is showing you. There's no worshiping of the Buddha. There's no worshiping of the Dhamma. The responsibility always falls on us if we want to set ourselves free from such a deplorable existence. So it's not even the AI in the world that we see today. It's not even world politics. It's not climate change. It's not this, it's not that, because there's always going to be some problems. If you're living in this loka, this existence, you're bound to have problems. So what's special about this? There isn't anything special. The only special thing that I can think of is the fact that you are present in a human body and are being exposed to the Dhamma because you choose to. And now what are you going to do about it? Nobody will allow you, nobody will cause you to penetrate the Dhamma. It's how much energy, how much chanda, how much fervent interest you apply in taking this to the next step by understanding, like in your day, this is practically speaking, next time you're excited about something, just observe. What was the thing that triggered that excitement? Was it something that you saw? Was it not something that you heard or smelled? What was it? Or a thought? Just that is a wonderful spark to get things rolling in the right way. And then you're going to see the connection of your feelings with, oh, I wonder how that feeling came about. Oh, there was a contact. Oh, okay. But why was I interested in the contact? Why was I pursuing it so much? Well, because I had the intentional thoughts about that. But why? Well, because I saw something. Okay. Because I saw it, I perceived. I had more perceptions. In the Magandiya Sutta, Lord Buddha says, Sanya viratassa nasanti gantha. For the person who has severed himself or herself from sanyas, from perceptions, there cannot be any more yokes, any bondage, any shackles. Panya vimuttassa nasanti moha. For the person who has liberated oneself from all that with wisdom, there cannot be any more delusions. It's all you, therefore. No one does this for you. So that's what I consider, if there's anything special about now, that's it. Because the world's always going to have some problems. Your body's always going to have some problems. It's a body, it's designed to. The same thing happens with now in this third section, because one who keeps giving attention to the fundamental constituent, that is fragrance or smell, then this itself causes the arising of perceptions. So I'm just going to jump intentional thoughts that you start now pondering over because of the sense smell. And then these thoughts turn into more and more contacts. You start looking for contacts to be made. And because of these contacts being made, now there's in you the triggering of different feelings because of those contacts, which started with the smell. Next time you smell a whiff of something, either a terrible smell or something delightful, like that bhikkhu who once came from his pindapada, and he was a bhikkhu who lived alone in the forest. And we have this in the Samyutta Nikaya. I think I've mentioned it before. And he comes, and it's a hot day, and there's nobody around, but there's a lovely pond. It's a lotus pond next to his kuti. So he takes off his robes, and then he goes and jumps into the cool water and the pond. And he's like, oh, this is heaven. Oh, and then he sees a lotus right there, and he reaches in, and the smell of the fragrance of the lotus is so pervading, and he can't help himself, and he does that. Takes a strong whiff of the lotus. Meanwhile, there is a earth deva who's watching him closely, and he says, oh, I'm going to teach this bhikkhu a lesson in Dhamma. And he says, ah, thief! Points the finger at him and says, you're a thief. Bhikkhu, what kind of a bhikkhu are you? You're a thief. And the bhikkhu says, how could you call me a thief? I'm a bhikkhu. I don't have anything. I didn't steal anything. How could you call me a thief? And he says, no. You know what I'm talking about. You just stole the fragrance of that lotus. And he says, how? I didn't plug it. I didn't cut the lotus. What are you talking about? What fragrance did I steal? He says, no. You have relinquished a lay life. You are exposing yourself through many difficulties to watch the mind, to watch all these tricks of the mind, and yet you're here indulging. And the bhikkhu finally wakes up to how kind this deva is and has been. And he says, yes, thank you, friend. You've shown me the Dhamma. I apologize. Thank you for making me see. And then he gets a little bit too excited, and he says, oh, from now on, could you please, if I go off the rails, could you please show me the Dhamma? Could you come in and jump in and tell me, hey, bhikkhu, come back? And it's like, he says, the deva is smarter than him, apparently. He says, no, what do you think I am? I have nothing else to do but to teach you Dhamma here. You're the bhikkhu here, genius. I think he realizes. But the senses are always pulling us out, especially now. I guess nowadays, based on from the days of Facebook, I remember so many bhikkhus would go to the jungles, and they would post pictures with their smartphones. So I don't think today we have just the lotuses to be worried about for bhikkhus, sad to say. But all of these could be turned into wonderful tools for meditation, deterrence, in a sense, tamara, if one is smart enough. Because I don't think we are as lucky as that bhikkhu to find devas watching out for us all the time. Anyhow, so it is the varieties of these feelings which then give rise to the varieties of desires and fervent interest involved with smell. So remember, the chanda can be good chanda or bad chanda, right? The desire. I mentioned about the desire for Dhamma chanda, but that is rare. Most of the time, what we have chanda for is for other things with the six senses. So always watch, okay, why am I feeling driven to do this? There's nothing wrong with you investigating that. In fact, it's encouraged to investigate. These desires and jhana directed towards these smells then produce the varieties of lustful appetites and longings. That's what happens when you don't pay attention to the interest, to the chanda. It will become a powerful blazing fire of passion. Some people are passionate about delusion, you know. I have come in contact with individuals who are passionately driven to keep themselves in delusion. A few people even mentioned clearly, with no uncertain terms, how they want to remain where they are, and I should not ask them certain questions that make them realize that they are naked. They have nothing to anchor themselves on when life comes to an end. Please, Bhante, I'm fine where I am. Okay. There's no forcefulness in the Dhamma, you know, nowhere. That's why you will never find bhikkhus, real bhikkhus, going knocking on people's doors and saying, here's a pamphlet. Listen to the Buddha. Here's our, 5 precepts. Practice this. There's no self-respecting bhikkhu who would ever be doing that, because Lord Buddha never did that. And he is our perfect example. The Arya Savakas never did such things. So we hold the responsibility for ourselves. It is the varieties of these longings and passionate drives for certain smells that lead a person on an unending series of quests pertaining to other and more smells. The quest is simple. You don't have to have variety of quests, searchings, pariyesana. You don't need to have a variety of them. One of the things in the Anguttara Nikaya that Lord Buddha says is like habit forming, maladaptive, using some modern lingo from psychology, is food is one, learning is another. These are addictive things. One has to be careful. Another one that Lord Buddha says is the bug of traveling. To go keep traveling from place to place. Some people I know made that into a dukkha, unfortunately, in some Southeast Asian countries, unfortunately. But that's not the goal of it. Because when you have that quest, I have to go, I have to do this, I have to, you're on the wrong path, because that's Mara talking. The quest has to happen. Sit some corners, sit down, shut up, and practice. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to travel anywhere. Oh, there's a beautiful hermitage over there somewhere. It's like, I have to go there. And that's where arahantship is waiting for me. No, it's waiting for you right there next to the dumpster. Your mindset is number one. How will you sit next to the dumpster? The Dhamma is real, therefore. It's personal. In the next section is the flavor or taste, the tongue, basically, the object for the tongue. Bhikkhus, when one keeps giving attention to the fundamental constituent that is flavor or taste, then this itself causes the arising of varieties of perceptions that have to do with such flavors. And then it gives rise to varieties of intentional thoughts one ponders as a result of having tasted a certain flavor. Oh, I remember that time when I had this, thing. Oh, yes. Anything that comes in and creates this jolt, this jittery, this movement, this agitation in the mind, it doesn't matter what it is. As I said many times, it could even be Dhamma related. But if it is causing agitation in the mind, it is Mara. It is your ignorance. It is not Dhamma for sure. Your job at that moment is to observe that very closely, very, very carefully investigate that agitation and your relationship to it. Now, immediately it should, because if it is real sati, it will cause that agitation to drop drastically if you are practicing right sati, samma sati. And it will drop, if it is, you will drop into samma samadhi, and there will be joy coming in you, rising, bubbling up. And suddenly there's tranquility that happens. And now there's more and more equanimity. Suddenly there's wisdom. Ooh. It doesn't require us to go on quests, you see. You just had to give yourself a tiny little moment of penetration. It could be anything. It could be the way you're breathing. It could be the way you're agitated because you saw someone, you heard someone, you experienced an itching sensation in the body, which is coming up next. Or it could be a flavor, something that you didn't expect to see or to taste in the food. I was like, what is that? What is that? I was eating an olive the other day, and all of a sudden, I taste something. I was like, that's not normal olive. Something's wrong. It's gone bad. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. Good practice. All right. What is happening? What is happening? What is happening? Is it Dhamma? Or I can't believe this is happening to me. The second one is not Dhamma. The first one is. Lord Buddha even says in one of the suttas, I believe in the Samyutta Nikaya, how there's even Nibbana at the tip of your tongue. Imagine there is at the tip of your tongue. Bhante Nyananatta says this clearly, but there's a sutta where he says, imagine you are tasting food, but there's a razor that's there in your mouth, that you've eaten a morsel of food, but accidentally there's this sharp piece of metal. If you've ever eaten fish, bony fish, very, very bony fish, that's very hard to pull out, suddenly everybody becomes a meditator. Have you noticed? Everybody becomes very mindful. I don't want to swallow that piece of bone and die. I think we would have many arahants at the dinner table or the lunch table if they're practicing Buddhist. If people were able to bring that awareness into their eating, into their chewing. It is the varieties of these feelings which then give rise to varieties of desires and fervent interests. And those, I'm paraphrasing here, lustful appetites and longings come out of that because of the flavors. Furthermore, it is the varieties of these longings and passionate drives for certain flavors that lead a person on an unending series of quests. It is these varieties of unending quests for tastes and flavors that bring forth the varieties of assets having to do with taste. Now we look forward for more. I remember as a layman, people would ask me in my 20s, 30s, oh, where are you going to go this weekend to eat? Why? Oh, there's a new restaurant that opened up in Los Angeles. We have to go check it out. There's so many reviews about it. That becomes a joyful drive for so many people around the world today. Have you checked out this place? Have you checked? So we are basically slaves to the senses. The eyes, the ears, the sounds, the fragrances or smells, touches, flavors, and especially what's coming up last is the thoughts. But I just want to touch on the feeling, the touch, tactile of the body. Because when one keeps giving attention to the fundamental constituent that is tactile object, then this itself causes the arising of the varieties of perceptions that have to do with such tactile objects. We are trying so hard to recreate experiences we've had with any of these senses, but in this case, the physical. We want to experience that tactile object. Either it's a soft surface, or someone touching us in a certain way. All these, we're seeking sensations, we're seeking, and that becomes a purpose of life, a purpose of living. In fact, happiness is interpreted as having the exposure to these things, and that is sad, because that would mean we are equating happiness with pleasure seeking. They're totally different. Happiness is safety, pleasure is not. Pleasure brings with it its nemesis. It's unavoidable. It's the opposite side of the same coin. On one side, you have pleasure. On the other, guaranteed side, you have pain. And you will never, ever be seeing one without the other, unless you are talking about happiness, which today's culture has been misled, lied to, deceived into thinking that they're one and the same, happiness and pleasure, and they're not. They're not. A person who's completely burned, third-degree burns, they have no ability to feel anything on their body, or their nostrils are gone. They can't smell. I mean, their tongue is messed up. They can't taste, or they're blind now on top of that, and their ears are malfunctioning. Such a person can still feel happiness, but no pleasure. So the question is, what is more important to us? Unfortunately, everywhere you turn, everything, every nook and cranny that your senses are exposed to, we're being given the poisonous information. It's not information, it's lies, that you need to feel pleasure, to feel happy, and they're not the same. They're not the same. You can live with happiness and really change your life around, but you don't have to live with pleasure. But life without happiness is not worth living at the same time. And that's why we pursue living with the Dhamma, because Dhamma guarantees happiness. For the, obviously, if it didn't, we wouldn't have it today, 26 centuries later. Still being beautiful in its beginning, beautiful in its middle, and beautiful in its end. That's the singular Dhamma that Lord Buddha taught. It still pervades with the same aroma, beauty of happiness, no matter where it is, what culture it finds itself in. So Lord Buddha is giving us the warning signs here. With all of these, he's saying, this is not it. This is not happiness. You're seeking happiness and you have every right to. But stop looking for happiness in the wrong places. And finally, because when one keeps giving attention to the fundamental constituent that is mental object, then this itself causes the arising of the varieties of perceptions that have to do with such mental objects. And these in turn give rise to the varieties of intentional thoughts one ponders as a result of having cognized or known a mental object. The intentional thoughts then give rise to varieties of contacts having to do with that mental object, which in turn trigger the varieties of feelings to arise pertaining to that mental object. The mental object, be it an idea, be it a thought, anything, a memory, anything that comes into the purview, to your cognizing screen, movie screen of your awareness, anything is going to be much more than the other five that we covered. The other five senses, the five objects of the senses, right? Visible object, sound, smell, taste, physical touch. But this takes the cake. This one is the most powerful, because this works on, they all rely on this as well, by the way. This is what we're talking about also, is manovinyana, right? The mind, the processing of the mental experiencing of those things, including the mind, including the thought, the cognizance of the mind. This is why it's so dangerous to have ideas, to stick to ideas. Because Lord Buddha, even when he was talking to Bāhira, he said, even when you are knowing a thought, when seeing, there's just seeing. One trains just to see the seeing. That's it. Sute sutamattang bhavissati. When hearing, just the hearing. Mute mutamattang bhavissati. When sensing, that included all the other three senses except for the mind that's coming last. So nose, nose, taste, and body. That's the mute mutamattang bhavissati. And then vinyate vinyatamattang bhavissati. When you are cognizant, knowing of this thing that in the mental arena, you just let it be. You just not acknowledge it. You don't latch on to it. That's why it's extremely dangerous to listen to our concepts, because concept means it's already concretized. You have an idea, you have a thing, and the Dhamma is not a thing. It's living, as I said in the beginning. Your life is living. That's what distinguishes also an arahant. Remember, Lord Buddha said, when he gave a comparison to people to know the differences in the subtlety, in the evolution of a person, he says, imagine a line that is drawn, that is carved through solid rock. Somebody gets a chisel and a hammer, and then you go ahead or a sledgehammer, you just create this groove, this thick groove that will stay in that rock for hundreds of millions of years. And then there's another kind of a person who is like a line that's drawn in the sand. It stays there for maybe a few days if there's no moisture or the waves can't reach it. But then eventually the wind or the waves approach it and poof, the sand wipes it clean. No more line. The third one is a lot more subtle. It's like that line you draw on the surface of a lake. Momentarily you see the ripples, but then as your finger moves away from the surface, eventually the surface of the lake finds its equanimity, its balance, its status quo, and it's back to normal. It was there momentarily, the line. And then he says, the arahant is the fourth kind. It's like the trace of the birds flying through the sky. Can you trace their path? Do they leave footprints or wing prints in the sky? You can't. That's the arahant. They're so light. So concepts are heavy. That's what I'm trying to say, including concepts about the Dhamma. Everybody's lost in their own ideas, interpretations, commentaries of the Dhamma. Get a life. Just relax. Lord Buddha said enough. You don't have to go ahead and impress others with your hundreds of pages of interpretation. But that's what we have. People love ideas. It's so because we're living in the realm of Mara. And Mara often comes in the guise of Dhamma in these days. But be wise. Be wise. That's why we're going back to the actual suttas and trying to extract the jewels, the gems, and try to make it understandable for us. What can I use now and benefit and penetrate to them? So you don't need to be attached to any of these concepts either. Use them wisely. Furthermore, it is the varieties of these longings and passionate drives for certain mental objects that lead a person on an unending series of quests pertaining to other and more mental objects. And it is these varieties of unending quests for mental objects that bring forth the varieties of assets having to do with mental objects, which one continuously seeks to acquire and not let go. Not even the ideas do we attach ourselves to. Ideas about the Dhamma. Always. When I was a child, actually, I remember I was very, very young. I tried running away from my shadow. I thought I could. I started moving my hand. I think every child does that. I was standing against a wall in the summertime, just pull my leg back or try to leave a room or run into a room and look outside to see if my shadow's still there because I thought I was moving fast. Children, right? But concepts are, to me, they're kind of easier than to get rid of your shadow. Because we have to see how much is this changing me? How much is this really transforming me? Anything that is not, it doesn't belong there. Something is wrong. My attachment to it is not going to make it worthwhile, because it won't bring happiness. Because happiness is like those birds' footprints or wing prints in the sky. It's very light. Happiness is light. In fact, it's so light that it causes other beings to rise up along with you. Lifts up the hearts of others around you. That's happiness. You don't have to touch them. You don't have to hear them. They don't have to hear you. But happiness, nevertheless, is very infectious. Just like wisdom. Wisdom is so light as well. Therefore, because this is what is meant by the varieties in the fundamental constituents are what give rise to the varieties of perceptions, which in turn give rise to the varieties of the intentional thoughts one ponders. These varieties of intentional thoughts then are what give rise to the varieties of contacts. The varieties of contacts then give rise to the varieties of feelings. The varieties of these feelings then bring about the varieties of desires and fervent interests, which then, in turn, produce the varieties of lustful appetites and longings. Furthermore, it is the varieties of these longings and passionate drives that lead a person on unending series of quests. And it is these varieties of unending quests that bring forth the varieties of assets, which one continuously seeks to acquire and not let go. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Dense sutta, saturated with so much Dhamma. So I encourage you to go over it again a few times, either maybe by listening to this recording or especially take your time with looking at the material. And it's always good to print it out and underline, highlight, add your own. How does this resonate with you? What stays with you? Because sometimes you don't need to know so much Dhamma, but it might be a tiny little phrase, short phrase that sticks with you. Remember Chula Pantaka, the brother of the Arahant, who wasn't yet Arahant, the one who was called a dullard, stupid, the ignorant, the one who couldn't remember or memorize even a single verse from the Sutta Nipada, from the Dhammapada, nothing. And then Lord Buddha gave him a piece of white cloth and he says, just keep saying Rajo Haranang, Rajo Haranang, Rajo Haranang. That was it. He saw what that meant. Striking away the dirt. That's what roughly it means in English. Rajo Haranang. I'm striking away, I'm wiping it clean, the dirt. But there was no dirt there. It was a white piece of crisp white cloth, fresh. And then he saw that it was his own dirt that he was adding. So it had nothing to do with the fabric of the cloth, because the cloth itself became dirty as he kept on saying Rajo Haranang and touching it, wiping it. So sometimes it's just a very short phrase that sticks with us. It might be your own words because you read something, heard something, and you were inspired to just, oh. And that might even take you to Nibbana. You have to give yourself some legitimacy if your practice is legitimate. But to have that happen, your intention, your interest has to be legitimate. You shouldn't be seeking any other interests, in a sense, other than breaking free from suffering. And I think that's the most noblest. And that's what Lord Buddha would expect from us, I feel. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions or comments. Okay, so there are none. Let us transfer some merits. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mambaranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well, healthy, happy, growing clearer and clearer in your hearts and minds with your understanding of the Dhamma growing exponentially, moment to moment, not just day by day. And may your loved ones also share in those fruits by tasting your happiness in more ways than one. And may your practice help protect this planet. May it spread harmony and equanimity between people, their family members, communities, countries, where the devas feel proud once again to be around humans and feel safe around us, and conversely to protect us at the same time. And may you attain Magga Phala Nibbana Supreme in this very life. Sukhi Hotu.